Hello, my friend. Let me ask you something, and I need you to be brutally honest with yourself. When was the last time you lay awake at 2 in the morning, staring at the ceiling, replaying a conversation that already ended? When was the last time your chest felt tight over a decision that should have taken 5 minutes? When did something as simple as sending a message, making a call, or choosing a direction turn into a full-blown mental marathon? You know the feeling. Your jaw clenches. Your shoulders lift without you noticing. Your mind starts running simulations. What if this happens? What if they say that? What if I regret it? What if I look stupid? The same thought circles back again, and again, and again. By the time you finally decide, you're exhausted, not from action, but from thinking. And here's the part that stings. You've probably told yourself this is a good thing. You've probably believed that this means you're careful, responsible, intelligent, that you're just someone who thinks things through. But what if that story is wrong? What if the very thing you're proud of, your ability to analyze, to anticipate, to mentally prepare, is the exact mechanism keeping you stuck? Here's something nobody tells you about overthinking. It doesn't come from intelligence. It doesn't come from depth. It doesn't even come from high standards. It comes from a safety system in your brain that doesn't know the difference between a real threat and an imagined one. Your brain is built to protect you. Thousands of years ago, hesitation kept humans alive. Scan the environment, predict danger, avoid the wrong move. That wiring is still there. The problem is, your modern life is not a savanna filled with predators. It's emails, relationships, career choices, social interactions. But your brain reacts the same way. Uncertainty feels like danger, and thinking feels like control. So your mind spins, not because you're broken, not because you lack discipline, but because your cognitive safety system has learned that rumination equals protection. Now let's flip something important. Most people believe overthinking means they're being careful and smart. And honestly, it makes complete sense that they do, because society praises caution. We reward the thoughtful one, the analytical one, the one who considers every angle. But here's what that belief is quietly doing to you. Every time you delay action in the name of being thorough, you strengthen hesitation. Every time you replay a conversation to avoid discomfort, you train your brain to fear real-time imperfection. Every time you wait for total certainty, you push momentum further away. The truth, the real truth that most people never discover, is that overthinking is not a sign of intelligence. It's a sign that your safety system is overactive. And when you start seeing it this way, everything shifts. Instead of admiring the loop, you question it. Instead of obeying every thought, you examine the pattern. Instead of waiting to feel ready, you begin to understand why ready never seems to come. This audiobook is not about just stop thinking. That's naive, and it doesn't work. This is about understanding the 7 brutal truths about overthinking that most people never confront. Truths about why clarity doesn't come from more analysis. Truths about why your brain mistakes motion for danger. Truths about why you feel stuck even when you know better. And by the end of this, you won't just understand why you've been stuck. You'll have a system, a clear, practical framework to interrupt the loop, calm the noise, and move with conviction instead of hesitation. You'll know exactly what's happening in your mind when the spiral begins, and exactly what to do next. No fluff, No vague motivation, just clarity. Because this isn't about thinking less. It's about thinking differently and living differently as a result. Right now, you might still believe your overthinking is serving you, that it's protecting you from mistakes, that it's keeping you sharp. But what if it's been quietly stealing your time, your confidence, your momentum? What if the cost isn't obvious because it's incremental? A missed opportunity here, a delayed decision there, a conversation you never started, a risk you never took. Small moments, big impact. So before we go any further, I want you to notice something, not the thoughts themselves, the pattern, the repetition, the exhaustion that follows thinking it through. That's not intelligence. That's a loop. And if you're willing to look at it honestly, you're about to see it in a way you never have before. Before we fix this, you need to see exactly how this pattern is playing out in your life and what it's quietly costing you. Section 2, the real problem. How overthinking is quietly eroding you. You're not weak. You're not broken. Here's what's actually happening. You've trained your mind to believe that more thought equals more safety. And because you're intelligent, self-aware, and capable of complex analysis, that training stuck. It doesn't look dramatic from the outside. It looks responsible. It looks mature. It even looks impressive. But let's bring this down to real life. It's you drafting a message and deleting it 5 times because one sentence might be misunderstood. It's you opening a job application, reading every requirement twice, then closing the tab because you're not fully ready. It's standing in the shower replaying a conversation from yesterday, rewriting what you should have said, as if the right wording could still change the outcome. It's spending more energy preparing for a moment than actually living it. And here's the part most people never admit. It's exhausting, not physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. You wake up tired not because you did too much, but because you thought too much. You feel behind not because you lack ambition, but because your ambition gets trapped in analysis. You crave momentum, but you keep choosing preparation over participation. Sound familiar? Let's name 3 beliefs that quietly fuel this pattern. The first is the idea that overthinking prevents failure. It feels logical. If I consider every angle, I won't be blindsided. If I predict every outcome, I won't be embarrassed. If I rehearse every scenario, I won't be caught off guard. But in practice, something else happens. You start treating uncertainty like a problem to solve instead of a reality to navigate. And since uncertainty can never be fully eliminated, your brain never gives you the green light. So you wait and wait and wait. The second belief is that more thought equals better decisions. Again, it sounds intelligent. Depth is good. Reflection is good. Strategic thinking is good. But there's a threshold. After a certain point, thinking stops adding clarity and starts adding noise. You revisit the same variables. You circle the same possibilities. You second-guess the same instincts. What felt like precision becomes paralysis. The third belief is more subtle. It's the belief that emotional control means suppressing your reactions. That if something triggers anxiety, insecurity, or doubt, the correct move is to analyze it until it disappears. So instead of feeling the emotion and moving forward, you dissect it. You interrogate it. You try to think your way out of it. But emotions don't dissolve under interrogation. They intensify under resistance. Now let's talk about the hidden cost. Not the obvious cost, Not the missed text or the delayed decision, the deeper one. Every time you override your initial instinct because you don't fully trust it, you weaken self-trust just a little. Every time you tell yourself, I need more time to think, when what you really need is courage, you chip away at your own authority. It's subtle, incremental, almost invisible, but it compounds. Opportunities shrink because you hesitate. Conversations lose honesty because you rehearse instead of respond. Risks feel larger because you've trained your brain to associate movement with danger. Over time, something shifts in your identity. You stop seeing yourself as decisive. You start seeing yourself as someone who struggles with decisions. You begin to approach life cautiously, not strategically, cautiously. And that's a very different energy. Caution contracts, strategy expands. One protects, the other progresses. There's also the slow accumulation of regret, the kind that doesn't explode all at once. It drips, a chance you didn't take, a boundary you didn't set, a version of yourself you almost stepped into, but didn't. Regret isn't loud at first, it whispers. And the more you overthink, the more those whispers stack up. I want to be very clear about something. This is not about shaming you for being thoughtful. Reflection is powerful. Self-awareness is rare and valuable. But overthinking is not reflection. Reflection moves you forward. Overthinking keeps you circling. Reflection asks, what can I learn? Overthinking asks, what if I fail? Reflection ends in action. Overthinking ends in hesitation. And when hesitation becomes your default setting, life starts to feel smaller than it should. Have you ever noticed how quickly you can advise a friend? How clear you are when it's someone else's situation? You can see the next step. You can see the obvious move. But when it's you, the clarity disappears. That's not a lack of intelligence. It's emotional entanglement. Your brain is trying to protect you from social rejection, embarrassment, loss, uncertainty. So it overproduces thought in an attempt to engineer safety. The result? You feel stuck in your own head. You start questioning things that used to feel natural. You hesitate in moments that once felt simple. You begin to mistake mental activity for progress. And here's the hardest truth in this section. The longer this pattern runs unchecked, the more normal it feels. You stop noticing the loop. You just live inside it. But the cost keeps accruing. Less spontaneity, less risk, less aliveness. You become hyper-aware but under-engaged, sharp but stalled, and deep down you know it. You know you're capable of more momentum than this. You know you have ideas, energy, ambition. You can feel the gap between who you are and how you're operating. That gap is not a character flaw, it's a system problem. Your brain learned that thinking equals safety, so it thinks, and thinks, and thinks. Not because you're incapable, because it's trying to help. But help, when misapplied, becomes harm. So the real problem isn't that you think too much. It's that your thinking has become a substitute for living. And until you understand why your brain keeps choosing this substitute, you'll keep fighting the symptoms instead of addressing the source. To change this, we have to look under the hood of your mind and understand why your brain keeps pulling you back into the same loop. Section 3. The root cause. The survival loop in your brain. You're not overthinking because you lack discipline. You're not overthinking because you're dramatic. And you're definitely not overthinking because something is wrong with you. There is a mechanism running, and once you see it clearly, something shifts. Let's look under the hood of your mind. Inside your brain, there's a small almond-shaped structure called the amygdala. Its primary job is survival. It scans constantly for threat, not just physical danger, but social rejection, embarrassment, uncertainty, loss of status, loss of control. To your nervous system, those risks are not minor. They are survival-level signals. Now pair that with another powerful region, the prefrontal cortex. This is the executive center. Planning, strategizing, simulating the future, weighing consequences, running scenarios. When uncertainty appears, a difficult conversation, a big decision, an unanswered text, the amygdala fires. Potential threat. Your body tightens, your chest constricts, your thoughts accelerate. The prefrontal cortex immediately responds. Let's solve this. So it starts running simulations. What if I say this? What if they react like that? What if I fail? What if I regret it? What if I embarrass myself? What if I lose something? The mind spins not because you are irrational, but because your system is trying to protect you. Here's where it gets interesting. Every time you mentally rehearse a scenario, anxiety drops slightly. Not completely, but enough. Your brain interprets that small drop in tension as progress. And when anxiety reduces, even temporarily, your reward system releases a small amount of dopamine. Dopamine isn't just pleasure, it's reinforcement. Your brain says, good, that helped. Do it again. So the next time uncertainty appears, what does your brain do? It pulls you back into simulation mode. Think more, analyze more, prepare more, anticipate more. And just like that, a loop forms. Uncertainty to threat, signal to mental simulation, to temporary relief, to reinforcement, to repeat. This is what we'll call the survival loop. It feels productive, it feels responsible, it even feels intelligent, but it's not precision, it's protection. Let me give you a metaphor that will stick. Imagine you're overthinking like a car alarm. Car alarms are not designed for accuracy. They are designed for sensitivity. A thief touches the door. Alarm. A strong wind shakes the frame. Alarm. A leaf falls on the hood. Alarm. Loud, repetitive, urgent. Not because every stimulus is dangerous, but because survival systems are biased toward false positives. Better to react to 10 harmless leaves than miss one real threat. Your brain operates the same way. Uncertainty equals possible danger. Possible danger equals simulation. Simulation equals temporary safety. And so the alarm keeps firing. The problem? You are living in a world that requires nuance. Career decisions are not tiger attacks. Text messages are not life or death threats. Trying something new is not exile from the tribe. But your nervous system hasn't fully updated to that reality. From an evolutionary standpoint, social rejection once meant isolation. Isolation once meant death. So the system evolved to treat social and emotional uncertainty as serious risk. That means when you hesitate to apply for the job, it's not laziness. When you replay the conversation in the shower, it's not weakness. When you mentally rehearse saying no, but never actually say it, it's not incompetence. It's a survival loop. And survival systems are stubborn. Here's something crucial. The prefrontal cortex, the thinking brain, believes it is in control. But when the amygdala is activated, the emotional system runs the show first. Your logical mind becomes a tool for the alarm. Instead of asking, is this actually dangerous? It asks, how do I eliminate every possible risk? Which is impossible. So you think more, and more, and more. The temporary relief you feel while analyzing is real, but it's misleading. It's like scratching an itch. Brief relief, deeper irritation underneath. The loop tightens over time. The more you analyze, the less you act. The less you act, the less evidence you gather that you can handle uncertainty. The less evidence you gather, the more uncertain everything feels, which triggers the amygdala again, and around you go. Now notice something empowering. Nothing in this mechanism suggests you are broken. In fact, it suggests the opposite. Your brain is working exactly as designed. It is hyper-efficient at detecting potential risk. It is excellent at scenario planning. It is deeply committed to your safety. The issue is calibration. The alarm is too sensitive for the modern world. And because the loop reduces anxiety temporarily, your brain keeps selecting it as the default strategy. You are not addicted to thinking. You are addicted to relief. That distinction matters, because if relief is the driver, then more thinking will never be enough. There will always be one more variable, one more angle, one more possible outcome to analyze. Uncertainty can't be eliminated by thought. It can only be metabolized through action, but action triggers the alarm, so the loop defends itself. That's why understanding this mechanism is liberating, but not sufficient. You can know this intellectually and still find yourself spiraling at 2 a.m. because awareness does not automatically deactivate a survival pattern. It simply gives you leverage. The next layer, the deeper layer, is belief, because underneath the biological loop sits a powerful story. A story that says, if I think enough, I'll be safe. If I prepare perfectly, I won't fail. If I analyze every possibility, I won't feel regret. And as long as that belief feels true, the survival loop remains justified. You won't challenge it. You'll defend it. You'll call it responsibility. You'll call it intelligence. You'll call it maturity. But what if the belief itself is distorted? What if the very strategy you're using to protect your future is quietly shrinking it? Now that you understand why this happens, here's the part nobody talks about: the belief that keeps this loop alive. Section 4, the Great Reframe. What you thought was protection is a prison. Most people believe if they just think a little more, they'll finally feel certain. And it makes complete sense. If I just analyze this one more time, if I just consider every angle, if I just make sure I'm not missing something, then I'll feel ready, then I'll feel safe, then I'll move. But here's the truth. The feeling you're waiting for is not the result of more thinking. It's the result of movement. And the longer you wait for certainty before acting, the weaker your capacity for certainty becomes. This is the great inversion. You believe thinking creates clarity. In reality, action creates clarity. You believe avoiding mistakes protects you. In reality, avoiding mistakes prevents you from becoming someone who can handle them. Let's dismantle this carefully. Certainty feels like control. Control feels like safety. So your mind keeps searching for the perfect configuration of thoughts that will eliminate doubt. But uncertainty is not a puzzle that can be solved from a chair. It is a condition of being alive. No amount of mental simulation will remove it entirely. The only way your nervous system learns that uncertainty is survivable is by walking through it. Right now, your confidence is tied to preparation. You feel capable only after extensive rehearsal. But rehearsal without exposure builds dependency. You start believing, I can handle this as long as I've thought about it enough. That subtle condition is the prison, because life rarely gives you full rehearsal. Conversations shift, opportunities appear unexpectedly, decisions demand immediacy. And when you haven't trained yourself to move without total certainty, you freeze, not because you lack intelligence, but because you trained your nervous system to require guarantees. Here's the second belief that quietly keeps you stuck. If I avoid mistakes, I'll avoid pain. Again, completely understandable. Mistakes can feel humiliating. They can sting. They can trigger shame. So your brain concludes, eliminate mistakes at all costs. But mistakes are not the opposite of safety. They are the tuition for growth. When you avoid mistakes, you don't become safer. You become fragile. Because fragility is not the absence of error. Fragility is the inability to recover from error. Confidence is not built by being right. It's built by surviving being wrong. Let that land. When you delay action to prevent mistakes, you deny yourself the very experiences that would make you resilient. And resilience, not perfection, is what produces lasting calm. This is the awakening. Overthinking feels like armor, but it's actually insulation. It keeps you from exposure. And exposure is the only environment where emotional strength develops. Think about a muscle. It doesn't grow through visualization alone. You can imagine lifting weights for hours. The muscle will not change. Growth requires resistance. Similarly, emotional mastery requires friction, awkward conversations, imperfect decisions, visible attempts, unpolished action. Each time you act without full certainty and survive, your nervous system recalibrates. The amygdala learns that wasn't fatal. The prefrontal cortex gathers real-world data. I can adapt. And slowly the survival loop weakens. But here's the trap. Your mind argues back. What if this mistake is different? What if this one costs me too much? What if acting now creates regret? Notice how persuasive that sounds, because the brain always highlights potential loss. It rarely highlights the cost of inaction. Let's name that cost clearly. Delayed action erodes self-trust. Every time you say you'll decide later, you subtly communicate to yourself, I don't trust my current judgment. Every time you overanalyze instead of responding, you reinforce, I'm not ready. Over time, this compounds. Opportunities shrink. Your world narrows. You begin selecting only situations where risk feels minimal. But minimal risk equals minimal growth. And minimal growth eventually becomes regret, not dramatic regret, quiet regret, the kind that whispers, I wonder what would have happened if I had just tried. That whisper is heavier than a mistake, because mistakes close specific doors. Inaction slowly closes you. Now here's the empowering shift. Decisive action is not recklessness. It is emotional training. When you make a decision with 70% certainty, instead of waiting for 100%, you are strengthening tolerance for ambiguity. When you speak before rehearsing perfectly, you are building adaptability. When you apply before feeling fully qualified, you are expanding identity. Each act becomes a repetition in the gym of emotional resilience. You stop trying to eliminate discomfort. You start training your capacity to handle it, and something remarkable happens. Clarity begins to follow action. You take the job and discover what you actually enjoy. You have the conversation and realize the outcome wasn't as catastrophic as imagined. You try the project and learn faster than you ever could from thinking alone. Experience collapses imagined fear. The unknown becomes known, not because you thought your way there, but because you walked. This is the new lens. Certainty is not a prerequisite for movement. Movement is the generator of certainty. Mistakes are not proof of inadequacy. They are proof of participation. Overthinking promises protection, but protection without growth becomes confinement. You don't need to become someone who never feels doubt. You need to become someone who can move with it. That is emotional mastery, not the elimination of fear, but the refusal to let fear dictate pace. Right now, you've been negotiating with your anxiety, trying to think your way into permission, waiting for your mind to approve action. What if permission comes after action? What if confidence is a side effect, not a requirement? This is the pivot. You are not trying to silence your brain. You are retraining it. You are teaching it that uncertainty is not emergency, that imperfection is not catastrophe, that movement is not danger. And you do that not through theory, but through structured, intentional practice. Understanding the survival loop gave you awareness. Reframing your beliefs gives you leverage. But leverage without structure fades. So now we move from insight to implementation. Now I'm going to give you the exact system that turns this understanding into transformation. Section 5, Introducing the System. The Clarity Conversion Protocol. Insight without structure fades. You can understand the survival loop. You can intellectually agree that action creates clarity. You can even feel motivated for a moment. But when the next uncertain situation appears, the text you don't know how to answer, the decision you keep postponing, the conversation you're rehearsing, the old pattern can return. Why? Because patterns don't dissolve through awareness alone. They dissolve through architecture. That's why you need more than inspiration. You need a system. What I'm about to give you is not a collection of tips. It's not just breathe. It's not just think positive. And it's definitely not just stop overthinking. This is a structured method designed to convert overthinking into decisive clarity. It's called the Clarity Conversion Protocol, and it works because it addresses the problem at 3 levels: behavior, emotion, and identity, in that order. Most advice fails because it attacks only one layer. It tells you to change your thoughts without interrupting your habits, or it tells you to act without regulating your nervous system, or it tries to boost your confidence without reshaping how you see yourself. But overthinking is not a single-layer issue. It is a loop reinforced by action patterns, emotional chemistry, and self-concept. So the solution must be sequential. The Clarity Conversion Protocol has 3 pillars. Pillar 1, pattern interruption. You must first break the automatic cycle that pulls you into mental simulation before it gains momentum. Pillar 2, emotional recalibration. You must retrain your nervous system to tolerate uncertainty without triggering emergency-level alarm. Pillar 3, identity rewiring. You must become the kind of person who sees decisive action as natural, not reckless. Let's briefly understand why this sequence matters. If you attempt emotional regulation without interrupting the thinking spiral, you'll calm down temporarily, then get pulled back in. If you try to be more confident without addressing the emotional charge underneath decisions, your identity shift won't stick. If you interrupt patterns but still believe that certainty is required before action, The loop will simply reappear under a different disguise. This system is layered intentionally. First, we stop the bleeding, then we stabilize the system. Finally, we transform the core. Let's look at each pillar at a high level. Pillar 1, pattern interruption. Overthinking feels complex, but behaviorally it's predictable. Uncertainty appears. Your mind begins simulating. You chase relief through analysis. Pattern interruption is about catching the loop early and breaking its momentum. Not by suppressing thought, but by redirecting it into decisive microaction. You don't argue with the alarm, you change the channel. One decisive move is more powerful than 20 hypothetical scenarios. Pillar 2, emotional recalibration. Remember the survival loop. The amygdala fires. The prefrontal cortex tries to problem solve. If the nervous system remains dysregulated, your thinking brain will always be hijacked into protection mode. So we must train your body to experience uncertainty without escalating it. This pillar is about expanding your window of tolerance. It's about teaching your system. Discomfort does not equal danger. When your emotional baseline stabilizes, decisions feel lighter. Not because risk disappears, but because your reaction to risk changes. Pillar 3, identity rewiring. This is the deepest layer. Right now, you may unconsciously identify as the careful one, the responsible one, the one who thinks things through. That identity feels virtuous, but if it's fused with fear of error, it becomes restrictive. Identity rewiring shifts you toward the one who moves, the one who adapts, the one who learns in motion. When identity changes, behavior becomes automatic. You don't force action, you embody it. Now here's why this protocol creates hope grounded in structure. Because it doesn't ask you to become fearless overnight. It doesn't demand that you suddenly love uncertainty. It simply guides you through a progression. Interrupt, recalibrate, rewire. Each pillar reinforces the next. Pattern. Interruption gives you immediate traction. Emotional recalibration gives you stability. Identity rewiring gives you permanence. Together, they convert mental noise into movement, and movement into clarity. Notice the shift in language. We're not eliminating overthinking, we're converting it. The same cognitive power that fuels analysis can fuel strategy. The same sensitivity that detects risk can detect opportunity. The same depth of thought can become depth of execution. Overthinking is not wasted intelligence. It's misdirected intelligence. The clarity conversion protocol redirects it. You stop using thought as a shield, you start using it as a tool. And once the system is installed, something profound happens. You still think deeply, but you don't drown in it. You still consider consequences, but you don't freeze. You still feel uncertainty, but you don't wait for it to vanish before acting. This is structured hope, not hype, not motivational intensity that fades by tomorrow. A framework you can return to every time the loop begins, because it will begin again. That's normal. But now, instead of spiraling, you will recognize the pattern. And recognition is power when paired with action. So we begin at the foundation. We start not with identity, not with emotion, but with behavior. Because the fastest way to disrupt a mental loop is to change what you do next. Let's start with the foundation, pattern interruption. Section 6, Core Pillar 1, Pattern Interruption. This is where everything becomes practical. You understand the loop. You understand the survival mechanism. You understand why overthinking feels compelling. But understanding alone does not change behavior. That's why we begin with action. Pattern interruption is the first pillar of the clarity conversion protocol because loops cannot survive disruption. A loop exists by momentum, thought to thought to thought, analysis to analysis to analysis. The longer it spins, the stronger it feels. So we don't argue with the loop, we interrupt it, not with force, not with self-criticism, not with complicated techniques, with a small, decisive action. Let me tell you about my friend Daniel. Daniel was intelligent, detail-oriented, someone who prided himself on doing things right. He would write emails and rewrite them, delete sentences, reconsider tone, imagine every possible interpretation. Hours could pass before he pressed send. Sometimes he would close the laptop and tell himself he would do it later, but later never felt easier. The loop always returned. What if I sound unprofessional? What if they misunderstand? What if I regret this? The email became a battlefield, not because the message was difficult, but because uncertainty activated the survival loop. Daniel believed that thinking more would eventually produce the perfect message. But perfection is a moving target. There is always one more adjustment, one more possibility, one more angle. So the loop defended itself until he discovered something simple. The 3-minute decision rule. Here is how it works. When uncertainty appears and you notice the spiral beginning, you give yourself 3 minutes. Not to think more, to act. 3 minutes is enough to do something small but decisive. Send the email, make the call, choose the option, respond, move. The action does not need to be perfect. It only needs to be real. Why 3 minutes? Because loops strengthen with time. The first minute feels manageable. The second minute introduces doubt. The third minute invites hesitation. If you act before the loop reaches full strength, you change the trajectory. Instead of analysis to analysis to analysis, you create a new sequence. Uncertainty to action to data. Data is powerful because data is reality. When you act, you gather information. Maybe the email response is neutral. Maybe the conversation is fine. Maybe the outcome is not catastrophic. The imagined danger dissolves, not because you thought it away, but because experience replaced speculation. This is the core principle of pattern interruption. Action precedes clarity, not the other way around. Now let's contrast this with how overthinking usually works. Overthinking promises safety. If I consider everything, I will avoid mistakes. It sounds logical, but it produces paralysis, because considering everything is impossible. Human life contains infinite variables. You cannot predict every outcome. You cannot control every response. You cannot eliminate uncertainty. So the loop expands, and the more it expands, the less you act. Over time, this creates dependency on mental rehearsal. You begin to believe, I can handle it as long as I think about it enough. That belief feels responsible, but it weakens self-trust, because self-trust is built through evidence. Evidence that you can act, evidence that you can handle outcomes, evidence that you can recover. Mental simulation does not provide evidence. Action does. This is why the 3-minute decision rule works. It shifts the focus from certainty to movement. You are not required to know everything. You are not required to feel fully ready. You are not required to eliminate doubt. You are required to choose within 3 minutes. Now I want you to imagine applying this to a real situation. The text you keep delaying, the conversation you avoid, the application you hesitate to submit, the boundary you want to set. Instead of analyzing, you decide. Not perfectly, not forever, not with absolute confidence. You decide in the moment. This does two important things. First, it interrupts the loop. The survival mechanism loses momentum because you did not feed it with additional analysis. Second, it creates data. Maybe the outcome is good. Maybe it is neutral. Maybe it requires adjustment. All of those possibilities are useful because life is not about eliminating mistakes. It is about learning from them. Now let's address the emotional objection. You might be thinking, what if I make the wrong decision? This is the voice of the survival loop. It highlights potential loss. It amplifies risk. It demands guarantees. But here is the truth. Every decision carries uncertainty. Even doing nothing is a decision. The question is not whether risk exists. The question is whether you will engage with it. Action is not the elimination of risk. It is the management of risk. When you act, you create opportunities to adapt. When you avoid action, you remain in a static environment where growth cannot occur. This is why pattern interruption is empowering. It gives you immediate agency. You do not have to wait for perfect conditions. You do not have to feel fully confident. You do not have to solve everything in your head. You simply act. One small step. 3 minutes. That is enough. Now let's make this practical. The 3-minute decision rule. 1. Notice the loop. You will recognize it. Thoughts circling, doubt increasing, hesitation growing. That awareness is power. 2. Set a 3-minute timer. This creates structure. It limits the mental space available for analysis. The loop thrives on unlimited time. Structure weakens it. 3. Choose action, not the perfect action, not the final action, a meaningful action. Send the message, make the call, submit the application, say the thing. 4. Observe the outcome. This is data, not judgment. Data informs future decisions. 5. Repeat daily for 7 days. Consistency matters. Loops weaken through repetition of new behavior. You are training a new pattern. Now let's address why this works. Loops are habits. Habits are neural pathways. Neural pathways strengthen with use. If you repeatedly analyze instead of act, the analysis pathway becomes dominant. If you repeatedly act instead of analyze, the action pathway strengthens. This is neuroscience, not motivation. Your brain is adaptable. It rewires based on behavior. That means change is possible, not through sudden transformation, not through perfection, through consistent, small actions. The 3-minute decision rule is small, but small actions produce large outcomes over time. Imagine applying it once per day, one decisive moment, 7 days a week. Over a month, that is 30 moments of practice. Over a year, hundreds of repetitions. Each repetition strengthens self-trust. Each repetition reduces the power of the loop. Each repetition builds evidence that you can handle uncertainty. This is how momentum begins. Not with grand gestures, with simple choices. Now you have the tool, pattern interruption, the first pillar, a practical method to break the loop in real time. But interruption is only the beginning, because once you can stop the spiral, you must understand what fuels it emotionally. That is the next layer. Emotions, the nervous system, the deeper architecture of overthinking. Once you can interrupt the loop, you're ready to understand what's fueling it beneath the surface. Section 7, Core Pillar 2. Emotional recalibration. Have you ever delayed a decision just to avoid feeling anxious? Have you ever told yourself you would act when the mood was right? Have you ever waited for clarity that never arrived? This is where we move beyond behavior. Pattern interruption helped you stop the loop in real time. It gave you a tool, a small, decisive way to break momentum. But loops are not only behavioral, they are emotional. Underneath overthinking is an emotional system attempting to manage discomfort, uncertainty, doubt, the subtle ache of not knowing. Your nervous system interprets these sensations as signals, not always signals of danger, but signals that demand attention. So you respond, you think, you analyze, you seek reassurance. The emotional discomfort lessens temporarily, and the loop reinforces itself. This is why pattern interruption alone is not enough. You can interrupt a behavior, but if the emotional charge remains unmanaged, the behavior will return. So we recalibrate, not by suppressing emotion, not by pretending discomfort doesn't exist, but by changing your relationship with it. Let's talk about what emotions actually are. Emotions are physiological responses. Heart rate changes, muscles tighten, breath shifts, thoughts emerge. These responses are messages, not commands. They are data points. Your body saying, I notice something uncertain. I feel something unfamiliar. I am preparing to respond. The problem arises when you interpret the message as emergency. Anxiety appears and you assume something is wrong. Doubt appears and you assume you are incapable. Discomfort appears and you assume you must escape it. So you escape into thought. Overthinking becomes emotional regulation. But it is an inefficient form of regulation because it delays resolution. Let's use a rhetorical loop to explore this. Have you ever delayed a decision because you felt anxious? Have you ever waited for certainty before speaking? Have you ever told yourself you would act when you felt ready? How did that work? Did readiness arrive? Or did the loop return? This is the core insight. Emotional discomfort does not require immediate elimination. It requires tolerance. Tolerance is the capacity to experience emotion without being controlled by it. Think of it like a wave. Emotions rise, they crest, they fall. If you resist the wave, it feels larger. If you fight it, you exhaust yourself. If you observe it, it passes. The 90-second reset is the technique we use for emotional recalibration. It is simple. When an emotion arises, 1. Notice it. Name it if you can. Anxiety, frustration, uncertainty. Naming reduces vagueness. Vague threats feel larger. Specific experiences feel manageable. 2. Breathe slowly, not because breathing solves the emotion, but because breath influences physiology. Slow breathing signals safety to the nervous system. The amygdala calms, the body relaxes slightly. 3. Allow 90 seconds. Do not analyze. Do not argue. Do not attempt to fix the feeling. Emotions peak and decline naturally. 90 seconds is often enough for the crest to pass. This is not suppression, it is observation. You are teaching your nervous system, I can feel this and remain safe. That lesson is transformative because overthinking thrives on emotional avoidance. The loop tells you, if I think hard enough, I will feel better. But thinking is not feeling. It is an attempt to control feeling, and control is fragile. When circumstances shift, the need for control intensifies. So we recalibrate. We expand tolerance. Not overnight, not perfectly, through practice. This brings us to daily exposure. Emotional recalibration requires experience. Small experiences, intentional experiences, moments where you choose uncertainty, not dramatic leaps, micro choices, answering a message without perfect wording, making a decision without exhaustive analysis. speaking before rehearsing every possibility. These moments train the nervous system. They provide evidence. Evidence that uncertainty is survivable, evidence that discomfort is temporary, evidence that you can act and remain safe. This is emotional mastery, not the elimination of emotion. Mastery is relationship. You do not need to control feelings. You need to understand them. You do not need to suppress discomfort. You need to coexist with it. Think of emotional recalibration like physical training. The first time you lift a weight, it feels challenging. Muscles respond. Fatigue appears. If you stop immediately, nothing changes. If you continue with appropriate effort, adaptation occurs. Muscles grow stronger. The task becomes easier. Emotional tolerance works the same way. The first time you act amid uncertainty, it feels difficult. Your nervous system resists. That is normal. With repetition, tolerance expands. What once felt overwhelming becomes manageable. What once triggered the survival loop becomes data. This is the emotional arc. Behavior to tolerance, tolerance to mastery, mastery to freedom. Now let's address a common objection. You might think, but what if the emotion is telling me something important? This is a wise question. Emotions are informative. Fear can signal risk. Discomfort can highlight boundaries. Anxiety can reveal areas of growth. We are not dismissing emotional information. We are refining interpretation. Emotion is not instruction, it is input. You still evaluate situations, you still make decisions, but you do so without being ruled by immediate reaction. This distinction matters. Overthinking treats emotion as something to solve. Emotional recalibration treats emotion as something to understand. When understanding replaces resistance, the relationship changes. The survival loop weakens because the loop depends on avoidance. If discomfort triggers action rather than analysis, the loop loses power. This is why the 90-second reset is effective. It interrupts automatic escalation. It creates space. In that space, choice becomes possible. You can respond instead of react. Now let's make this practical. Daily exposure is the application of this principle. Choose one small uncertainty each day. It does not need to be dramatic. It should be manageable. Examples. Respond to a message without rewriting it. Make a minor decision without overanalyzing. Initiate a conversation you might usually avoid. These actions are reps, repetitions of emotional tolerance. Each rep strengthens capacity. Each rep reduces reliance on the survival loop. Each rep builds confidence. Not the false confidence of perfection, the genuine confidence of experience. You learn that outcomes are survivable. You learn that mistakes are recoverable. You learn that action is possible even amid uncertainty. This is inner stability, not the absence of emotion. Stability is the ability to remain grounded while feeling. It is the capacity to act without being hijacked. It is emotional freedom. Now you understand the second pillar. Pattern interruption broke the behavioral loop. Emotional recalibration addresses the emotional system beneath it, but there remains a deeper layer. Identity, how you see yourself, the beliefs you hold about who you are, because behavior and emotion change more easily when identity evolves. And this is where everything changes, because the final shift isn't about what you do, but who you believe you are. Section 8, Core Pillar 3, Identity Rewiring. This is the deepest layer. Behavior matters, emotion matters, but identity determines consistency. You can interrupt a loop, you can regulate emotion, You can act decisively for a time, yet if your identity remains unchanged, if you still see yourself as someone who struggles with decisions or overthinks by nature, the old patterns will eventually return. This is why we shift from doing to being, from trying to stop overthinking to becoming someone who moves, from resisting doubt to embodying decisiveness. I want you to try something. Say it in your mind. I am a decisive person. Not perfectly, not every moment, but as an orientation. I am a decisive person. Notice how that feels. If resistance appears, that is useful data. Identity change always meets internal friction because your nervous system prefers familiarity. Familiar patterns feel safe, even when they limit growth. This is where the fear-hope bridge becomes important. Most people believe fear means they are not ready. They interpret anxiety as a signal to wait. I will act when I feel confident. I will decide when I feel certain. I will move when the timing is right. It makes sense. No one enjoys discomfort. But here is the inversion. Fear is not proof that you should stop. Fear is proof that growth is possible. Let that settle. When you feel nervous about a decision, it means the outcome matters. When you hesitate, it means change is real. When you experience doubt, it means you are stretching beyond the familiar. This is not a warning sign, it is a growth signal. The belief that fear disqualifies action keeps people stuck. They wait for conditions that never arrive. Perfect confidence, perfect timing, perfect certainty. These are illusions. Life does not provide guarantees. Identity is built through action under imperfect conditions. Every time you act in spite of fear, you cast a vote for the person you are becoming. Think of identity like a democracy. One vote does not determine the outcome, but repeated votes create majorities. If you consistently vote for overthinking, if you repeatedly choose analysis over action, the identity of someone who overthinks becomes reinforced. If you consistently vote for action, if you repeatedly choose movement over hesitation, the identity of someone who acts becomes reinforced. This is the principle of the decisive identity statement, a simple but powerful technique. It works like this. When uncertainty appears, you state your identity. I am a decisive person. Then you act in alignment with that statement, not perfectly, not dramatically, but in a meaningful way. Send the message, make the call, choose the option, take the step. The action does not need to be large. Identity change is built from small repetitions. Consider a musician learning an instrument. They do not become skilled in a single session. They practice. They make mistakes. They improve gradually. Over time, identity shifts. They become a musician, not because they were perfect, because they practiced. Identity works the same way. You become decisive by practicing decisiveness. You become confident by practicing action. You become someone who moves by moving. This is the hidden truth. Identity follows behavior, not the other way around. You do not wait to feel like a decisive person. You act like a decisive person. And over time, identity aligns with action. Now let's address the hidden cost of waiting to feel confident. Confidence is often misunderstood. People believe confidence is a prerequisite for action. I will act when I feel confident. But confidence is a result of action. You gain confidence through evidence. Evidence that you can handle outcomes. Evidence that you can recover from mistakes. Evidence that you can adapt. When you wait for confidence, you deny yourself the evidence that produces it. So confidence remains elusive, a moving target. This is why identity rewiring is essential. It bypasses the false requirement of emotional certainty. It focuses on alignment. Who do you want to become? What behaviors reflect that identity? How can you act in small ways that reinforce it? This is not motivational fantasy. It is behavioral psychology. Humans internalize patterns through repetition. Identity is shaped by repeated action. If you repeatedly act with decisiveness, you begin to see yourself as decisive. If you repeatedly act with hesitation, you begin to see yourself as hesitant. This is neutral science, not judgment. You are already practicing identity formation. The question is which identity you are practicing. Now let's make this practical. The decisive identity statement. When uncertainty arises. 1. Acknowledge the feeling. I notice doubt. I notice hesitation. I notice fear. Acknowledgement reduces internal conflict. You are not fighting the feeling. You are observing it. 2. State the identity. I am a decisive person. This is not a magical affirmation. It is a directional statement, a reminder of who you choose to be. 3. Take action. One small step. Send the message. Make the decision. Choose movement. Action aligns behavior with identity. 4. Reflect briefly, not with judgment, with data. What happened? What can I learn? How did it feel? Reflection reinforces growth. This sequence matters. Identity to action, to data, to growth. Over time, the gap between who you are and who you want to be narrows, not through perfection, through repetition. Now consider the alternative. If identity remains unchanged, patterns persist. Overthinking continues. Hesitation remains. Decisions feel heavy because behavior is being driven by an outdated self-concept. You see yourself as someone who struggles with decisiveness. So your brain supports that narrative. Identity rewiring changes the narrative. You begin to see yourself as someone who moves, not always perfectly, not always quickly, but consistently. This is the final shift. Behavioral interruption, emotional recalibration, identity transformation. 3 pillars, a complete system. Now I want you to imagine what life looks like when these pillars work together. You notice the loop and interrupt it. You feel uncertainty and tolerate it. You act in alignment with a decisive identity. Decisions become lighter. Momentum increases. Clarity emerges through experience. Not because overthinking disappears, but because you are no longer ruled by it. You engage with life. You make choices. You learn. You adapt. This is the integration phase, where understanding becomes application, where knowledge becomes behavior, where identity becomes lived reality. You are not trying to eliminate doubt. You are learning to move with it. You are not waiting for perfect confidence. You are building confidence through action. You are not becoming someone new. You are becoming the version of yourself that has always been possible. This is identity activation, and it changes everything. Now let me show you what your life looks like when all 3 pillars work together. Section 9, Advanced Integration, a day without the loop. Imagine waking up and noticing the difference. Not a dramatic transformation, no fireworks, just a subtle shift. Your first thought arrives and you observe it instead of chasing it. You notice the urge to check your phone. You notice the pull toward immediate stimulation. You notice the small whisper of uncertainty about the day ahead. And you breathe. This is pattern interruption in action. The loop begins, and you choose not to feed it. You get out of bed, not perfectly, not with overwhelming motivation, but with movement. You make coffee. You sit for a moment. You allow your nervous system to wake up. The old habit would have been to scroll, to analyze messages, to distract yourself from morning quiet. But today is different. You practice emotional recalibration. A small sensation of unease appears. Perhaps you don't feel fully ready for the day. Perhaps there is a lingering worry about something unfinished. You notice it. You name it. Not with judgment, just recognition, anxiety, uncertainty, a passing sensation. The 90-second reset applies naturally. You breathe slowly. You observe the wave of feeling. You do not argue with it. And then it softens. Not because you defeated it, because emotions rise and fall. This is inner stability. Now you move to action. A decision needs to be made. Maybe it is small. What to prioritize? What to address first? What to leave for later? The old version of you might have spent 30 minutes analyzing possibilities. But today you apply the 3-minute decision rule. You give yourself a brief window. What is the next step? Not the perfect step. The next step. You choose. You act. You send the message. You start the task. You move forward. Something important happens here. Data replaces speculation. Instead of imagining outcomes, you create one. It might be imperfect. That is fine. Perfection was never the goal. Progress is. As the day continues, challenges appear. A difficult conversation, a decision that requires courage, a moment where you feel uncertain. The old loop would have demanded endless analysis. What if I say the wrong thing? What if they react badly? What if I regret this? But you recognize the pattern. Pattern interruption, you pause, you breathe, you choose response over rumination, you speak, you act, you engage. And the outcome? Often it is neutral. Sometimes it is positive. Occasionally it requires adjustment, but it is never catastrophic. This is the discovery that transforms belief. Most overthinking is built on imagined catastrophes, scenarios that feel real in the mind but rarely materialize in life. When you act, you gather evidence. Evidence that outcomes are survivable. Evidence that mistakes are recoverable. Evidence that you are capable. Over time, this evidence shifts identity. You begin to see yourself differently, not as someone trapped in loops, but as someone who moves. As the day ends, reflection becomes part of the process, not self-criticism. Reflection. What worked? What did I learn? How can I improve? This is data, not judgment. Growth requires feedback, and feedback requires honesty. Now let's introduce a practical ritual that supports long-term integration. The Sunday Clarity Audit. Once per week, you set aside a small amount of time. Not hours, a brief session. The purpose is not to analyze everything. It is to review patterns. What decisions did I make? Where did I hesitate? What triggered loops? How did I respond? This is not an exercise in perfection. It is an exercise in awareness. Awareness creates opportunity. If you notice recurring triggers, you can address them. If you notice progress, you can reinforce it. The Sunday Clarity Audit becomes a checkpoint, a rhythm of reflection and recalibration. Now let's address common failure points. Because change is not linear, there will be moments of relapse, times when the old loop returns. This is normal. It does not mean you are failing. It means you are human. The key is response. If rumination returns, use pattern interruption, small action, movement. If emotional overwhelm appears, use the 90-second reset. Observe, breathe, allow it to pass. If perfectionism resurfaces, remind yourself, progress, not perfection. Identity is built through repetition. One setback does not erase growth. The difference between those who change and those who remain stuck is not absence of struggle. It is response to struggle. Coaching language matters here. You are not broken. You are learning. Learning involves mistakes. Learning involves adjustment. Learning involves time. Give yourself permission to grow. Now imagine the long-term trajectory. A day without the loop becomes a week. A week becomes a month. A month becomes a pattern. Decisions feel lighter. Action becomes natural. Clarity emerges through experience. This is not about eliminating complexity. Life will always contain complexity. It is about developing the capacity to engage with it, to move, to decide, to adapt. Let's visualize the difference. Before, analysis paralysis, hesitation, mental exhaustion, missed opportunities. After, decisive action, emotional stability, learning through experience, momentum. Notice that challenges still exist. Life does not become effortless, but your relationship with difficulty changes. You no longer avoid it. You engage with it. This is confidence, not arrogance, not perfection. Confidence born from evidence. Evidence that you can handle outcomes. Evidence that you can recover. Evidence that you can grow. Now consider the identity shift. You are becoming someone who acts, someone who learns, someone who moves. This is the final stage of integration. Behavior, emotion, identity, all working together, a complete system. You now have everything you need. Tools for interruption, strategies for recalibration, frameworks for identity growth. The question is not whether change is possible. It is whether you will apply what you have learned. Small actions, daily choices, consistent effort. These are the building blocks of transformation, not sudden perfection, progress, and progress compounds. Now there's just one question left. Section 10, Identity Transformation. We have reached the final stage. You understand the loop. You understand the emotions beneath it. You understand the identity shifts required for lasting change. Now we bring it together. Let's begin with a rapid recap. Pillar 1, pattern interruption. Overthinking survives through momentum. Thought leads to thought. Analysis leads to analysis. Interruption breaks the cycle. Not through resistance, not through perfection, through small decisive action. A message sent, a decision made. Movement before the loop strengthens. This creates data, and data replaces speculation. You learn that outcomes are survivable. You learn that mistakes are recoverable. You learn that action is possible. Pillar 2, emotional recalibration. Emotions are messages, not emergencies. Anxiety, doubt, discomfort. These sensations rise and fall. The 90-second reset teaches tolerance. You observe without judgment. You breathe. You allow the wave to pass. Over time, emotional intensity decreases, not because life becomes easy, but because your relationship with emotion changes. You remain grounded. Pillar 3, identity rewiring. Identity drives consistency. If you see yourself as someone who overthinks, behavior will follow. If you see yourself as someone who acts, behavior will follow. The decisive identity statement shifts orientation. I am a decisive person, not a perfect person, a decisive person. Actions align with identity. Identity aligns with actions. This is transformation, not sudden, not magical, built through repetition. Now let's speak directly. You are capable. You are not broken. You are not flawed. You are navigating patterns that can be changed. Overthinking is not a life sentence. It is a habit, and habits can be rewired. The difference between those who change And those who remain stuck is not intelligence, it is action. Small action, consistent action, action in the face of uncertainty. That is courage. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is movement despite fear. Most people believe they must feel ready before acting, but readiness follows action. You do not need to feel confident. You need to act in alignment with the person you want to become. Confidence will grow. Evidence builds confidence. Experience builds confidence. Survival of small risks builds confidence. This is the identity shift, from overthinker to doer, from hesitation to movement, from analysis to action. You become someone who trusts themselves, not blindly, not perfectly, but enough to move. Self-trust is built through evidence. Every time you act and survive the outcome, evidence accumulates. I can handle this. I can adapt. I can learn. Over time, identity transforms. You are no longer defined by loops. You are defined by choices. Now consider the binary choice before you. You can continue as you were, analyzing, hesitating, waiting for certainty. Life will continue. Opportunities will appear and pass. Time will move forward. Or you can choose something different. Action, growth, identity transformation. Neither path is guaranteed to be easy. Life contains challenges, but one path leads to movement. The other leads to stagnation. This is not judgment, it is clarity. The decision belongs to you. I want you to imagine your future self, the version of you who acts, the version of you who trusts, the version of you who moves. What would that person do today? Not tomorrow, today. One decision, one step. It does not need to be dramatic. Choose something small. A text you have delayed, a conversation you have avoided, a task you have postponed. Do it today. Not perfectly, not forever, just today. This is the micro CTA, a single action that creates momentum. Because momentum matters. Small actions compound, patterns shift, identity evolves. You are not required to solve everything at once. You are required to begin. The journey begins the moment you close this and choose. And that is the truth of transformation. It starts with a decision. I want you to say it to yourself. I am capable of change. Not as a promise, not as an affirmation, as a statement of possibility. You are capable. Change is possible. But possibility requires participation. Now is your moment. Not the only moment. Not the final moment. A moment. Choose something. Do it today. And observe what happens. Action creates data. Data creates learning. Learning creates growth. This is the cycle of transformation. Overthinking promised safety, but safety without growth becomes confinement. Growth requires movement. You do not need to be fearless. You need to be willing. Willing to try, willing to learn, willing to improve. That willingness is enough. You are enough. Not because you are perfect, because you are human. Humans learn. Humans adapt. Humans grow. You are capable of growth. Now let's return to the identity shift. You are becoming someone who trusts themselves, someone who makes decisions, someone who learns, someone who moves. This is not a distant future. It begins with choices today. Each choice is a vote for the person you are becoming. Vote for action, vote for growth, vote for self-trust. Over time, the majority of votes defines identity. You become decisive. You become grounded. You become confident. Not because life is easy, because you are capable. This is calm determination, not frantic urgency, not pressure. Calm determination. You know what to do. You choose to do it. That is power. Before we close, I want to acknowledge something. Change can feel intimidating. The unknown, the possibility of failure, the discomfort of growth. These feelings are normal. They do not disqualify you. They are part of the process. You are not alone in this. Many people struggle with overthinking. Many people seek change. Many people learn to grow. You can be one of them. The difference lies in action. Now I will leave you with a final thought. You are not your thoughts. You are not your loops. You are not your past patterns. You are a person capable of choice. Choice creates possibility. Possibility creates change. Change creates growth. The journey begins the moment you close this and choose. Choose something. Do it today. And trust the process. You are capable. You always have been.